Ja predlažem da počnemo sa prvim panelom. Ja sam Mirza Kušljugić, predsjednik Reset centra za održivu energetsku tranziciju, think tank baziran u Sarajevu i bit ću moderator ovoga prvoga panela. Zahvaljujem se organizatorima što su mi pružili priliku da moderiram panel koji ima izazovan naziv Energetski sistem Jugoistočne Evrope i strategije za prevazilaženje krize. Dozvolite mi, pošto je veći dio panelista iz susjednih zemalja koji ne razumije jezik koji sad trenutno govorim, da ja zbog jednostavnije komunikacije i njihovih odgovora panel moderiram na engleskom jeziku. So we basically have the question which is to be answered, how to overcome energy crisis with accelerating decarbonization of power systems in accordance with EU climate and energy policies. Today we have presented representatives from the region, from EU member states, Romania and Bulgaria, Minister Hristov from Bulgaria, Minister of Energy, and Mr. George Agafite, State Councillor of Romania. And we also have representatives from the region, Ministar Petar Đokić, Ministar Energije i rudarstva Republike Srpske, Bosna i Hercegovina, i gospodin Viktor Andonov, advisor to the Prime Minister of North Macedonia. There is a difference between these two countries. The member states have to oblige to the strict EU acquis, but also have, for us remaining from the Western Balkans, substantial financial support for their transition path. But all countries in the Southeast Europe face the challenge of implementing coal phase-out while ensuring security of supply. So which strategies do decision makers from the region see as winning for getting out of the crisis? And which are their strategic energy transition plans are the questions that we will try to answer. So we'll be working in the following mode. I will be asking the questions sequentially to participants on each of the thematic subjects, and I hope that we will have brief answers because we are already a little bit late and we have approximately 4 minutes per answer to the question. So the first thematic subject is strategic political commitment and strategic plans for phasing out coal and eventually fossil gas, expressed in coal regency and transition plans or in national energy and climate plans. We would also like to hear what's the potential role of fossil gas and nuclear energy in the forthcoming period. So I will start with a question to Mr. Agafite from Romania. Romania's new decarbonization law requires the definite closure of coal-fired power plants by 2030, with perhaps several remaining in strategic emergency reserves through 2032. Very ambitious. So, what were the driving economic and political forces behind this decision? And how do you plan to ensure the security of electricity supply without coal-based generation? The floor is yours.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for having me here. It's really a pleasure to talk about energy in a region so close to my country. We are all in the Balkans here. Coming back to your question, if we look back a few years ago, we were still in the talks at EU level and at global level. Is the climate emergency really an emergency, and what should we do about it? But nowadays, I'm glad that we passed that and we all agreed that the climate emergency is real and we have to adapt. So there was no question asked when the plans from the EU were set in for 55 and net zero for 2050, that Romania would adhere to those plans. We are fully committed to our European path. But also, following the aggression of Russia on Ukraine last year, we understood that we need security of supply and independence of supply. So there were like two main reasons that we managed to follow this agenda. First of all was our European commitment, and the second was our need to be fully secured energy-wise. Luckily, we have been blessed with a lot of natural resources in Romania. At the beginning of last year, we were 80% energy independent in gas and electricity. The phasing out of coal will be replaced with a lot of new energy supplies from nuclear, from gas, from green energy, solar power, wind power. And I will give you a few examples of the main projects that we are having ongoing right now and that we plan to implement in the following years. In regards to gas, just last year we started to extract the first molecule from the Black Sea, and we incremented our yearly production with 1 BCM. And we are very close to start the Neptune Deep project, which will basically double the input of gas to Romania. If now we are using around 11 BCM, just the Neptune Deep project will have around 10 BCM in supply per year. So that is a big part of the energy, and the gas will be covered more or less. We can do exports or even develop an industry gas-based. On the nuclear side, we have 3 huge projects that are going on, around 16 billion euros. We are talking about the implementing of the new units in Cernavoda, Unit 3 and 4, based also on CANDU technology. I don't know if you know, but Romania is the only country in Europe that has North American nuclear technology. So we have a 50-year history in nuclear, and we are planning to develop these 2 new reactors that will replace the capacities closed by the coal. But also we are planning to do the first SMR in Europe and maybe in the world. Let's see how things will evolve in the United States. These small modular reactors will help us develop not only energy, but will help us develop know-how center in Romania and the supply chain localized for all these new energy support. So there's a lot of things are going on, and we are fully committed to this green deal that we are on the path at now. And I believe that all the projects all the coal capacity that will be closed will be replaced by green energy. And also we are very much looking at, through the Just Transition Fund, to reconverting the counties that had a fossil fuel-based economy to a green economy through reconversion plans. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Agafitei. So the next question goes to Minister Hristov from Bulgaria. So Bulgaria core-fired power plants produce over 45% of the country's electricity. Bulgaria committed to close coal-fired thermal power plants by 2038. However, recently, according to the information from media, there is a political consensus to eventually backtrack from the EU's commitment and to renegotiate the energy sector greenhouse gas emission targets. If the information available is correct, what is the reason for this, I would call it a little bit anti-EU Green Deal rhetoric, or a real retract in strategic green energy policies?
Thank you. Well, first of all, it is a little bit of a fake news. Bulgaria is not backtracking. We're fully committed to the European targets for decarbonization, including the latest updates for 55. So the topic for renegotiation is related to the Recovery and Resilience Plan, where the previous government put even more challenging target there to be basically the advanced country in this coal phase out and decarbonization, which the energy crisis of last year demonstrated that it is not achievable. Currently, Bulgaria is producing much less energy from coal since last year. Basically, all the power plants were fully loaded due to the high demand of electricity in the region. We produced a total of about 45 terawatt hours of energy last year, exporting about 1/3 of that. So now, since the markets are more or less calmed down, we're not utilizing as much the coal-fired power plant, so already the share in the total mix is dropping together with the emissions. What are we doing currently is, last year we presented a strategy looking forward 30 years, since in the energy sector that's not even a long period, considering that the life cycle of a nuclear project, for example, is about 100 years. So last December we presented our vision for the power generation sector, which includes meeting all the European targets for decarbonization, while providing energy security in a very efficient way, utilizing all the natural resources in the country. So we're focused on developing nuclear, with plans to build up to 4 new nuclear reactors, considering that Bulgaria has been efficiently and safely operating nuclear reactors for more than 40 years. We have already the construction site licensed and approved, and we have the know-how to build and operate nuclear reactors. Another pillar is hydropower plants, where we have a lot of history and natural resources. And the third one is renewable energy, solar and wind. In order to facilitate rapid deployment of renewable energy sources, we have foreseen amendments in our legislative system, facilitating faster approval of these projects. And we are now coordinating with the European Commission the restructuring and the negotiations of the Recovery and Resilience Plan, considering the new chapter REPowerEU and the just transition plans. So basically, we would like to have a coherent package, logically connected, so that we can facilitate the coal transition process in a very socially just and economically feasible manner. Since the transition should be beneficial for everybody, not only for the industry and for Europe, but also for the people that live in the coal regions. And we believe that we can achieve that. So just to give an example, for example, we are proposing to double our targets for deployment of renewable energy sources by 2026, from 3.5 gigawatts to 6.5 or 7. This is combined with the projects in the REPowerEU chapter that are related to expansion of the grid system, which will allow us to connect all these renewable energy sources, but also to connect consumers, since our vision for the power generation sector is based on the total decarbonization of the economy, which means electrification. So basically electrification of transport, electrification of industry, replacement of natural gas with hydrogen, which again requires electricity for the production. So we foresee more than doubling the demand of electricity for the next 30 years, which means more than doubling the capacity for production. So based on that, we're seeing the coal phase out in a very smooth and rapid way, being replaced by zero emission and renewable energy sources, this way providing both the energy security, not only to the country, but to the region, because we believe that energy security is only possible minimum at a regional level. I don't believe that one country can be energy independent while the whole region is in turbulence. That's why Bulgaria has focused on providing energy security for the entire region. And our strategy is synchronized with the strategies of our neighboring countries, so that we do not compete, but actually complement our development and our transition plans.
Thank you. If I can conclude, two countries from Southeast Europe, members of the European Union, have the Repower EU as a guiding plan, and they will adhere to the obligations or commitments. And I will now turn to two representatives from the region. I will first ask Mr. Andonov from North Macedonia. You are the first country in the Western Balkans to announce the coal phase-out date. It was originally planned for 2027, but recently it was pushed back to 2030. So my question is, how do you plan to ensure the security of supply without coal-fired thermal power plant? And what will be the role of fossil gas, both for generation and heating in North Macedonia?
Thank you for your question. As you mentioned, our plan for coal phase-out was 2027 originally. This was based on our strategic documents. I would like to remind everybody that we prepared our strategy for energy development in the years 2018 and 2019, and they were fully based on the EU Green Deal, so we followed the EU legislation. And we prepared in the strategy 3 scenarios, and these results for 2027 and 2030 were part of the green scenario, where the major factors for this was the increased number of investments in the renewables, especially photovoltaic plants and wind plants. But security of supply of the country was the basic and the main driver of this strategy, and this can be ensured with our big hydropower plants, because we have more than 600 megawatts big hydropower plants. One of the major projects in our pipeline is the construction of one of the biggest dams in the region. This is pump storage plant Chebren. It will be a reversible plant, and this will enable our balancing opportunities, and will increase the possibilities for higher integration of renewables in the region, not just in North Macedonia. As you mentioned, the gas is part of our green scenario. Around 450 new installed capacity of natural gas plants. Let's say in Bitola, in Skopje, and in Negotino, we have concrete projects for this plant to be in the process of realization. And for our country, having in consideration that the gas will be some transitional fuel from coal to renewable scenarios, it is very important to make diversification of the supply, because in the moment and in the past we have only one connection through Bulgaria, but 100% booked by Gazprom. So there is no, I would say, security of supply here, and that's why we had in the last years concrete steps and actions towards diversification of the supply. This year, I believe that we will start with construction of the interconnection pipeline with Greece. We will connect there with the Trans-Adriatic pipeline. With the commencing of operation of the interconnection line with Greece and Bulgaria, we have another opportunity to have gas from Azerbaijan, and with support from EU and with good cooperation with our neighbors Bulgaria, we signed new interconnection agreement between the two TSO systems, and now we increase the present capacity of this pipeline. And now during this winter we had concrete results, and we received for the first time bids for natural gas quantities from other sources than Gazprom. We will be part of this joint project with Greece companies and Bulgarian in the LNG terminal in Alexandroupolis. So we believe that with these concrete steps, we are also negotiating with Bulgaria about some storage to keep some amounts of natural gas in their storage in Chile. So we believe that with this portfolio of the projects, we can enable this security of supply even without coal-fired plants. But I would stress here that now we are in, because according to our legislation, on each 5 years we need to adopt strategy for energy development. So now we are now in this moment, 2023, where we are preparing new strategy for energy development. So we will see based on the new analysis, because we don't need to forget that this year we had energy crisis in Europe that affected the whole energy systems in the region and in Europe. So this needs to be taken in consideration, and we will see, based on the new strategy, what will be our targets for the coal exit. But I believe that again we will follow the EU Green Deal and then this new Repower Europe plan. Thank you.
Thank you. If I can just shortly summarize, your security of supply is based on using the new gas-fired thermal power plants. Thank you. Sada bih uputio pitanje ministru Đokiću, ministru za energiju i rudarstvo Republike Srpske. Vlada Republike Srpske je u posljednje vrijeme promovisala vrlo ambiciozne planove investicija u proizvodne kapacitete, kako u vjetar i solar, tako posebno u hidroelektrane. U zadnje vrijeme čujemo i neke planove koji su vezani za gasne elektrane, ali je uvijek podcrtavano da u dogledno vrijeme sigurnost snabdijevanja je bazirano na korištenje termoelektrana na ugalj. Pošto Bosna i Hercegovina nema definisani datum izlaska iz uglja, na kojem konceptu strategije dekarbonizacije proizvodnje električne energije, na primjer na ETS sistemu, je baziran plan razvoja proizvodnih kapaciteta u Republici Srpskoj i da li je taj plan usaglašen sa dokumentima koji su prezentirani u integrisanom nacionalnom energetskom klimatskom planu ili njegovom nacrtu koji je predstavljen prije neki dan.
Hvala lijepo još jednom za priliku da govorimo o ovako značajnim pitanjima. Republika Srpska, kao što ste sami kazali, ima vrlo ambiciozne planove u daljem razvoju sektora energetike. Naravno da sve svoje planove baziramo na opštoj strategiji koju smo usvojili i u Republici Srpskoj i na nivou Bosne i Hercegovine, ali rukovodeći se i onim što su direktive i smjernice koje dolaze iz evropskih institucija. Mi smo potpuno svjesni potrebe dekarbonizacije i u njoj se kao procesu već nalazimo i to traje dugi niz godina. Svjesni smo potrebe da je neophodno izvršiti tranziciju u optimalnim rokovima kako bismo izbjegli moguće posljedice koje mogu da osjete i država, a posebno i građani, jer ovdje i u uvodnom dijelu, kada je govorio gospodin Lorkovski, on je upozorio na važno pitanje energetskog siromaštva, ali prije svega u kontekstu povećanja naknada koje bi se morale uvesti za proizvođače električne energije koji koriste fosilna goriva. Mi još uvijek imamo u ukupnom proizvodnom miksu oko 60% energije koju dobijamo iz fosilnih goriva i u Republici Srpskoj, a i u Bosni i Hercegovini. I naravno da je naš plan usmjeren ka promjeni, ubrzanoj promjeni te strukture i uvjereni smo da mi možemo već u narednih do 5 godina, ukoliko ne dođe do nekog složenijeg poremećaja u našem okruženju Evrope prije svega, obezbediti da se izgrade novi proizvodni objekti koji koriste energiju sunca i vjetra i hidroenergiju i da će u tom smislu proizvodni miks izgledati sasvim drugačije. On može čak da bude u iznosu 30% u korist fosilnih goriva ili čak i manje, a preostali dio za obnovljive izvore energije. Mislim da je taj plan vrlo realan i on se protokom vremena može samo poboljšavati i dovesti nas do skoro, ne u potpunosti, ali znatnog smanjenja energije iz fosilnih goriva. Naravno da je za naše područje potrebno imati u vidu da smo mi država, kad kažem država mislim i na Republiku Srpsku i na Bosnu i Hercegovinu u cjelini, koja je u periodu svojih unutrašnjih problema 90. godina, dug vremenski period bila spriječena da se bavi krupnim energetskim politikama, da kažem krupnim politikama koje bi osiguravale ubrzani razvoj, zato što smo bili fokusirani na pitanje stabilizacije prilika, normalizacije života, pa tek onda da se okrenemo pitanjima razvoja. I mi smo kao država ušli u fazu razvoja možda u zadnjih do 10 godina i sada smo intenzivno u fazi razvoja i najveći sektor gdje se ostvaruju najveći rezultati u razvoju jeste upravo energetika. I tu, kao što sam i tamo na preskonferenciji kazao, naša procjena vrijednost svih naših projekata u narednih do 5 godina dostiže vrijednost u ovom času oko 3 milijardi i 150 miliona maraka i bit će to i više. Čak u ovoj godini se može ugovoriti i više. Važno je reći da u svemu tome nacionalna kompanija elektroprivreda ima jedan poseban udio i ulogu i naša i ostale elektroprivrede u Bosni i Hercegovini i to je jako dobro jer se na taj način daje onaj stvarni osjećaj potpune sigurnosti za naše domaće potrebe, kako potrebe industrije, tako i građana u pogledu proizvodnje i snabdijevanja, ali se naravno oslobađaju određene količine i viškovi koje možemo kapitalizovati na tržištu. Mi smatramo da i ovo što ste kroz vašim pitanjem postavili, usmjerili ovu pažnju, smo veoma odgovorni kada je u pitanju primjena nacionalnog energetskog klimatskog plana ili ostvarenje ciljeva koje definiše taj plan, intenzivno kao dva entiteta koji nose svu odgovornost za oblast energetike i koji imaju u državi isključive nadležnosti da se bave energetskim pitanjima, da mi radimo na tome da usvojimo nacionalni energetski klimatski plan, ali i bez njegovog usvajanja u ovom trenutku mi razumijemo njegovu ideju i vrlo odgovorno i dosljedno radimo na ne samo razumijevanju, nego na primjeni, na provođenju, na planiranju i realizovanju onih aktivnosti koje nas vode ka ostvarenju ciljeva koje proizilaze iz nacionalnog energetskog klimatskog plana. Ono čime smo mi zabrinuti jeste promjena u evropskoj politici u sektoru energetike koja se desila u toku prošle godine, ona se pojačava i razvija u ovoj godini, a to je bez saglasnosti, bez bilo kakvog posebnog vida šireg informisanja, vraćaju se u pogon postrojenja koja proizvode energiju iz fosilnih goriva i to su izuzetno objekti sa velikom instalisanom snagom. Kakve su to poruke koje se šalju svima nama koji još nismo dostigli ciljeve iz nacionalnog energetskog klimatskog plana? Drugo, da li će se ovaj postojeći energetski miks u Evropi moći držati na ovaj način ili ne? Gospodin iz Lafaža je govorio o tome da je u njihovoj proizvodnji prilike utjecaje električne energije koju dobijaju iz fosilnih goriva ili uopšte korištenje električne energije u tom smislu problematično sa stanovišta 10%. Sve ostalo su neki drugi faktori utjecaja. Dakle, mi trebamo obratiti pažnju ne samo na oblast energetike, na naša velika ložišta koja imamo u energetskim objektima, nego i na ostale industrijske proizvođače koji su potencijalni veliki zagađivači, emiteri CO2. Kako ćemo sa tim da se nosimo? Imajući u vidu da je naša industrija još uvijek, rekao sam već, izašla iz faze konsolidacije i krenula putem razvoja, da bi velika opterećenja koja nameće primjena i ostvarenje ciljeva energetskog klimatskog plana, kao što je trgovina ETS-om i carbon border model koji nam stvara u budućnosti veliku obavezu, da li ćemo u tom smislu moći održati naše energetske objekte ukoliko se te vrijednosti budu primjenjivale na Bosnu i Hercegovinu u okviru onoga što je čak gospodin Gorkovski najavio, ja mislim da je to pogrešan pristup, da će time biti dovedeno, da će naša država biti dovedena u vrlo nepovoljno stanje, da će to jako pogoditi građane naše države, da ćemo sigurno se suočiti sa energetskim siromaštvom kojeg moramo izbjeći i kojeg ne smijemo dopustiti jer u 21. vijeku, 20. godine, 23 godine novog vijeka su bile godine velikih nada i očekivanja da ćemo biti na daleko višem nivou ukupne društvene razvijenosti i da nećemo imati onu vrstu problema koje obilježe prošlog vijeka. Zato mislim da nam treba mnogo dijaloga o ovim pitanjima i širokog razumijevanja za mjere koje će preduzimati pojedine države, posebno Bosna i Hercegovina, koja ima ambiciozan plan da bude dio Evropske unije i pored svojih unutrašnjih problema, tamo postoji visok nivo svijesti kod građana koji žele da budu integrisani u Evropu. Političke strukture to također žele, ali imaju određene svoje političke teškoće koje će oni savladavati, ja sam u to uvjeren da možemo, ali nam treba razumijevanje zato što smo mi zemlja koja je zbog naših unutrašnjih prilika iz 90. godina ostala negdje daleko iza drugih evropskih država, pa i država našeg regiona. I treba, ja smatram da prema Bosni i Hercegovini treba imati drugi odnos, da bismo i našu zemlju motivisali da može da participira adekvatno svim evropskim i širim evropskim politikom. U svakom slučaju reći ću kasnije ako budeš prostora o nekim našim energetskim planovima u pogledu novih investicija i da izrazim optimizam koliko smo do sada rezultata ostvarili i koliko će ih biti još u budućnosti.
Hvala ministre. We have here the clock who is indicating that we have 1 hour more for discussions. However, I also received a message from the organizers if it's possible to shorten for 10 minutes because the whole conference has been delayed. So prior to asking Mr. Dixon, I've just tried to refigure a panel in a way that I will combine some of the questions which are related to the renewable energy to keep also with the request of the organizers. So the real Schlagwort I got from the Minister Djokic about return of Europe to fossil fuel. However, from information that we have from the public reports, the renewables, wind and solar are really increasing the share in European Union or in European generation mix. So my questions to Mr. Dixon are two. The first one, what is your estimation the wind will be developing next 3 to 5 years in Europe, taking into account there were some problems, slowed down in the recent years? And the second one, which is some sort of the introduction to one of the follow-up panels regarding integration of variable production from wind in Europe, which technologies you see will play the key role in integrating that increased production, even though you indicated that is not enough increased, that it should be speeded up. So two questions from the previous and follow-up of the discussion from the region.
Thank you very much indeed, Mirza. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen ministers. It's great to be here. So wind energy is 17% of all of the electricity we consume in Europe today, and the EU wants that to be 43% by 2030. That means building over 30 gigawatts of new wind farms in the EU alone every year. At the moment, we're building only 15. Not enough, as you say, Mirza. But there are 4 key things happening which will enable us to increase the rate of expansion of wind and solar. The first is the new approach to permitting. Minister Christoph, you talked about the recent reforms you've introduced in Bulgaria. There's a whole new thinking on permitting in Europe now. The expansion of renewables is now a matter of overriding public interest. That principle is now enshrined in law. We have to take a population-based approach to species protection, not trying to protect every single bird, fish, or animal, and we have very tight deadlines on taking decisions on permits. And all that is now in EU law and is being reflected at national level as well. In the first quarter of this year, Germany permitted 2 gigawatts of new onshore wind farms in just 1 quarter. That is 3 times the pace at which they were permitting onshore wind 3 years ago. So things are changing on permitting. That's very positive. Secondly, there's a whole new approach to grid expansion. There's a wide recognition that transmission networks, distribution networks are not growing fast enough. We need to double the rate of investment in them. And there's a new mindset which says we have to build out renewables. That is central to energy security and climate security. And it's up to the TSOs to build out the grid and the DSOs. And the burden of proof is with them to show why they cannot give a grid connection permit. It's not with the renewables developers. Of course, we are balancing responsible. We provide voltage control, frequency control, and all the other ancillary services. In fact, more efficiently than thermal plants can. We need to be given full and equal access to all of those ancillary service markets. But it's up to the TSOs to build out the grid. And if they can't offer a grid connection, they need very good reasons to justify their saying no to connecting renewables. The third thing is a new approach to renewables supply chains. Europe is absolutely clear now it does not want to swap its dependency on Russian gas for a dependency on Chinese renewable energy technology. The EU is crystal clear. All of these new wind farms that we have to build in Europe should be built with turbines made in Europe. The EU does not want us to be building Chinese wind turbines here in Europe. And to that end, they have new Green Deal industrial policy, new financial support for wind and solar supply chains. This makes perfect political, societal, and economic sense, because then our economies can benefit from having the supply chains here. People can be working in these industries, and we strengthen our energy security by being in control of the technology and equipment. And of course, we need to reduce our dependencies on Chinese components, materials, rare earths, glass fiber, and so on. And the final thing is the EU's very clear that we need to strengthen the market signals to investors. It's very good that here in Serbia, government is now moving forward with two-sided contracts for difference. That, according to the European Union, is the best way to give clear signals to investors, long-term perspective of revenue stability. PPAs also have a vital role to play, and it's very good that in both Bulgaria and Romania you've now passed laws which ensure that corporate renewables PPAs can be signed freely between large industrial off-takers and wind farms. It's crucial when you have these market signals, when you have auctions, that any price ceilings should reflect the actual cost of the turbines and the solar panels. And there should be full indexation for any recent inflation in commodity costs. Thank you.
Well, I will scratch the plan for the panel, because so many interesting interventions in the first round of the answers, especially the last one regarding the European Union plans. Maybe you should think or reflect, I'm talking to the people from the Western Balkans, maybe we need Repower Western Balkans plan, because, or we may not need Western Balkan specific plans, we may need to find out a way how to join Repower EU. So with all geopolitical forces in the region, it's obviously that whatever we mentioned about the gas and the nuclear, it's obviously European orientations is wind and solar. My next questions will be combined if we were discussing in the preparation of the panel. It will be connected to the renewable scale-up, with a focus also on distributed prosumers and energy communities. So If I may start with, again, Mr. Agafitei, what are your plans for wind and solar? But what I have found very interesting is that Romania in 2022 increased the number of prosumers to 40,000. We heard the figure for Serbia a few minutes ago, and it is expected to reach a 6-digit figure this year. So for me, impressive. I've been following what has been going on in Romania regarding prosumers. Which support policies enable such a successful development of decentralized energy generation, and also if you could reflect on development of especially wind power in Romania. But we still have 40 minutes for 2 rounds. So please keep in mind that 4 minutes per
I will try to be brief. You mentioned 40,000 prosumers in Romania. This year we are expecting to have 87,000 more with the new program. There's a governmental program called the Greenhouse, Casa Verde in Romanian for the Romanian speakers here, which basically has an allowance of 4,000 euros per prosumer to install solar panels in their house. We faced a few challenges, some of them regulatory, other challenges that are starting to grow more and more out regarding the capacity of the grid. At the first phase of implementing this project, there was sometime a bottleneck, and now we changed the philosophy, and we are going to say, look, we are not going to start the program in the whole country at once. We are going to regionalize it. We are going to prioritize the areas where we have more sun, and they will be the first to access the program, and where the funds for that region, which will be percentage-wise bigger than the regions where we don't have enough sun, when that program will be finished, we'll move to the next region and so on, in order to avoid bottlenecks in the bureaucracy. Regarding the capacity for the grid, this is an issue that is getting bigger and bigger, and it is an issue that will be for the whole of Europe if you want to implement all these very optimistic plans for green energy. And we have plans for increasing the capacity of the grid for around interconnectivity for around 5 gigawatts, and we have 400 million for the national TSO for investments in the following years. Regarding the challenges that we face for the other projects, I would say also that we are facing regulatory bottlenecks for the nuclear sector, but we are trying to be proactive in this sense. All the new gas projects, I'm jumping from one to another, all the new gas projects that we have will be hydrogen ready, and we are increasing the capacity a lot on gas. I would like to thank our Bulgarian friends for implementing this year the IGB, the interconnector from Greece to Bulgaria, which will allow the free flow of gas towards Romania from Azerbaijan and other sources. So there are a lot of things that are going on bureaucracy-wise and legislation-wise, but we are trying to be flexible. We try to change our mentality, and I will give you an example, a very concrete example in regards to Moldova. Last winter they were out of energy because of the bombing in Ukraine, and in 6 hours we changed the legislation in order to be able to export energy to Republic of Moldova. It was a governmental huge effort, but we managed to do that, and this is the philosophy that guides us right now at the government level. So we are trying to move as fast as we can and be as supple as we can. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the conclusion is basically co-financing is important for the development prosumers. My just short question, is there any European money in that, or it's all European budget money?
There are money from the EU also, yes.
Thank you. So, Mr. Andonov, you have organized several auctions. You also have ambitious plans for prosumers. So your short comments or your plans for the short future, next 3 to 5 years, regarding development and renewable and decentralized generation.
As you said, we organized several auctions, transparent, in 2019, and we signed agreements for premium tariffs with companies for 130 megawatts in solar plants. And in the moment, I believe that according to information from the Energy Regulatory Commission, more than 100 are already on place. They're working on the grid, on the distribution grid. And this was the very clear signal to the investors that the government will follow this plan for decarbonization of the economy and support of the investments in renewable energy. And in general, if you want for the energy transition to be successful at the end, we need to share the portfolio, the investment portfolio between the big investors, let's say the big foreign companies that are present in the region, between the medium-sized companies from the country and the region, and the households or the small entities. And we are doing this in all segments. For the big investors, we have adopted new law for strategic investments, and we have already in place several big investments from Europe, Aquo from France, WPD from Germany, Mytilineos from Greece. We have companies from Bulgaria, SolarPro, Hex Solar. So they are, let's say, we are following this, that they should be also present in the country to share their experience in the transition. On the medium size, we provided these companies to participate on the competitions, and they made their investments with support of the government and the domestic banks. So this is functioning. And for the prosumers, because you mentioned the prosumers, we made some changes in the legislation, and we allowed very, very easy procedures for the households to install these rooftop installations. And we also are providing subsidies through the Ministry of Economy in amount of 1,300 euros per household to install this kind of system, which is 3 times lower than in Romania. But this is our financial capability of the country. And we believe that this will give results only in 1 year. According to the information from the distribution system operator, we have 80 megawatts installation on rooftops. And this part with the prosumers is different because usually the companies on their rooftops, they have a bigger capacity that can be installed. And we are limiting the installed capacity of the industry to 40 kilowatts. And let's say they can install 200, 300, 400. And usually they are going with this option. And they are obtaining a license for producing electricity. And they are working on the market through suppliers and traders. But it's obviously that the people, the companies are using this opportunity. And according to our strategy and the National Energy and Climate Plan, the potential is around 400 megawatts, and I believe that we can use this potential in the next 2 or 3 years and maybe increase more than this.
Thank you, Mr. Nadonov. Minister Christov, could you inform us which policy tools Bulgaria is using for increasing the share of renewables? Auctions, prosumers, subsidies?
We're implementing similar programs, as a colleague from Romania mentioned, to provide financial support to consumers to start producing electricity from renewable energy sources. The programs are targeting both households as well as industrial users. In addition to that, we're discussing with some communities to run a pilot project for the so-called virtual photovoltaic power plant, which basically means households practically renting out the space on their roofs so that we can install a distributed or decentralized photovoltaic power plant. But instead of these households consuming the electricity, actually these all elements are connected into one large photovoltaic power plant which sells the electricity on the market. So we're experimenting with different schemes in order to increase the share of the so-called prosumers. Personally, I believe that this has a very big potential that is not still utilized in Bulgaria, and especially for the industrial users, the potential to have your own electricity from renewable energy sources is very big. So we will definitely implement several other programs in that direction.
Thank you very much. Ministre Đokiću, u Republici Srpskoj još očekujemo podzakonske akte za novi zakon koji omogućava prozumere, a Elektroprivreda Republike Srpske je pokrenula inicijativu oko instalacije fotonaponskih panela na individualnim zgradama. Kako vi vidite razvoj građanske energije u sljedećih 3 do 5 godina, odnosno čitave priče distribuirane generacije i da li će distributivna mreža biti možda problem, kao što već vidjeli smo da se pojavljuje u Evropskoj uniji?
Od posebne važnosti, kao što smo svi svjesni, da podstaknemo ovu aktivnost i ovaj model proizvođač-kupac i da na taj način dođemo do efekta racionalnog korištenja električne energije, dakle ušteda u potrošnji. Kao što ste sami kazali, mi smo taj proces već otvorili. Za sada on još uvijek nije dobio dinamiku koju smo planirali čak u ovoj godini, ali sam uvjeren da će taj proces razvijati. Možda je jedna mala smetnja u formalnom razumijevanju, u suštinskom razumijevanju tog procesa bilo da je ideja da je javni poziv upućen u vrijeme kada je počela izborna kampanja u Bosni i Hercegovini, pa je neko pomislio da je to povezano sa političkim programima, što nema nikakve veze. To je u stvari jedan suštinski nacionalni projekat i uvjeren sam da će on dobiti na dinamici u narednom vremenu. Za sada smo zadovoljni sa onim koliko je u ovom času pokazano interesa i vjerujem da će taj proces da napreduje. Naravno da uvijek na našim tamo prostorima potrebna su prva iskustva, a ona kada protokom određenog vremena se potvrde kao pozitivna, tada će taj proces krenuti daleko snažnijom dinamikom. Potrebno je još u zakonodavnom dijelu regulisati pitanje izbjegavanja poreskih opterećenja koja mogu imati proizvođači i kupci u takve vrste energije i nadam se da ćemo u tom smislu uskladiti svoje aktivnosti sa poreskim sistemom i naš cilj na taj način, da kažemo, osloboditi i omogućiti da budu u cijelosti realizovan. Ono što jeste problem, to će biti distributivna mreža u pojedinim područjima i na rekonstrukciji distributivne mreže moramo nastaviti intenzivno raditi. Mi već to radimo, ali moramo raditi više. A mene posebno brine prenosna mreža u budućnosti, zato što u regionu imamo mogućnost da proizvodimo znatno više nove energije, u Bosni i Hercegovini posebno. Mi u Bosni i Hercegovini možda možemo imati još nekoliko godina, nećemo imati toliko utjecaja tog problema, zato što je potrošnja Bosne i Hercegovine na realno niskom nivou još uvijek i u tom smislu je moguće da proizvedena energija bude prihvaćena u postojeći sistem prenosne mreže, ali će se već sada i kako se budu završavali ovi objekti o kojima mi govorimo, pojaviti problem prenosa u regionu. Dakle, mi svoje viškove energije usmjeravamo ka evropskom regionu u više pravaca i razvoj interkonekcija je svakako posebno važan strateški projekat, ali istovremeno poboljšanje prenosa u regionu, u državama koje su nama susjedi i mi već sada imamo određene najave teškoća koje će se pojaviti zato što će obim investicija, odnosno obim proizvedene energije iz vjetra i sunca u narednih godinu do 2 dana znatno porasti u odnosu na postojeće vrijednosti i to može biti problem u prenosnoj mreži van prostora Bosne i Hercegovine. Zato je jako važno, što smo sada čuli, da se mora raditi na intenzivnom investiranju u razvoj prenosne mreže, da bi onda omogućili da ostvarimo pune efekte od proizvodnje energije iz obnovljivih izvora. Ako se tu ne bude desio razvoj, onda praktično sve ove investicije neće dati rezultate, efekte koje mi imamo, imat ćemo divne brodove bez mora. Tako da u tom smislu moramo ozbiljno raditi svi skupa, u Bosni i Hercegovini posebno, naša prenosna kompanija ima kapacitete, ali nedovoljne da bi mogla da brzo nosi taj projekat kako na prostoru Bosne i Hercegovine. Jako je važno govoriti o regionalnom pitanju, kako pojačati prenosne kapacitete u regionu i da učinimo dostupnim tu energiju tržištima koje su dalje od prostora Bosne i Hercegovine.
Hvala, ministre. I will use the remaining part of the panel just to try to answer one question. How do we finance energy transition? How do we finance grid expansion? How do we finance new power generation facilities? How do we finance coal phase out? How do we finance energy poverty measures? And I will start with the question to Mr. Dixon. What's the experience of Europe, how it is financed? And how much in that portfolio of financial support is part of the European Union funds package? How it is important? Because countries in the Western Balkans are not able to count on that. And one part for the remaining part of the panel to you. If you were the investor in the Western Balkans, in the situation as it is, or as you know it, and there are no auctions, there are no guarantees for balancing, what would be your commercial calculation to invest in wind?
Thank you very much, Mirza. First point to remember is, yes, we've got to raise a lot of finance, but economically, financing this transition is cheaper than trying to continue with the status quo. And the war has reminded us of that. There's lots of EU funding and finance available. You've talked about the investments in Transelectrica, the 400 million that you're putting in Romania. I think that's drawing on your recovery and resilience funds. There is still a lot of unspent recovery and resilience money, at least 200 billion euros. There are still very generous structural and cohesion funds, and EU funding also for candidate and partnership countries. The EU also has the European Investment Bank, the world's largest climate bank, which is now lending even more money for energy transition, and not just in EU member states. And of course, there is the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development as well, which has a special focus on the whole of the Balkan region and the wider Central European region. So there's no shortage of financial support. And there's also a lot of private finance that wants to invest in the energy transition as well. And this brings me on to your second question, Mirza. Lots of private capital out there. It needs a perspective of stable revenues. And of course, CFDs provide that. Corporate renewable PPAs also provide that. And it's great now that there are so many industrial and corporate consumers of energy around Europe and across the whole of the Balkans who want to decarbonize and want to decarbonize with renewable energy. 5 years ago, these guys did not like wind and solar. They thought we were expensive, they thought we were intermittent and messing up their energy supply and the whole of the energy system. Now they have a completely different view. They want wind and solar. They see that it's cheap. They want to decarbonize, improve their energy security, and they're banging on our door every day, begging us to build wind farms to help them decarbonize, whether it's for the direct electrification of their industrial processes or they want to decarbonize via renewable hydrogen. So I think we would encourage countries in the Western Balkans to look carefully at the corporate renewable PPA model, to look at the regulatory changes that you've introduced both in Bulgaria and Romania to stimulate this, to look at what is happening in the rest of Europe on PPAs as well.
Thank you, Mr. Dixon. Mr. Andono, you have big challenges in coal phase out, restructuring of Bitola region. You also have big challenges for scale-up of renewables regarding the investments. The funds available to the Western Balkans are limited. You indicated that in the presumers example. Probably the part that was missing is the part that in Romania comes from EU funds. And another question that I would like to ask representatives from the Western Balkans. Do you really foresee that your electric power company will be the leader of this process? Macedonian electric power company, is it going to be the leader of this process?
It's not, okay, I understand the question, yes. The biggest producer in our country is that this ESM, the state company, and it should be the biggest player and the biggest driver of the energy transition of the country, because we cannot done the, let's say, finalize the energy transition or the just transition process in the country without support of the state, and it's a state company. But Mr. Dixon made a good point. There is no shortage for money in EU, but there is shortage in the Western Balkan region, and this is obvious. We are receiving support from this international financing institutions such as EBRD, European Investment Bank, KfW. We are receiving some portion of grants for our projects through this initiative of Western Balkan Investment Framework, but this is 20%, 30%. And if we are discussing about the transition of Bitola, Bitola have more than 3,000 employers there, miners, most of them miners. The whole region of Pelagonia will be affected from this transition. Everything will be changed. We started with support of the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development and EU delegation in Skopje. In the last 2 years, this project just transition diagnostic, and we have, let's say, prepared some action plan that is tackling only these 2 regions of Kičevo and Bitola that will be affected as end of this just transition. And this is, for me, I would say, a good start. We need to understand that this will happen. Whether it will happen in 10 years or 15 years, this will happen, and we need to make smart decision. The politicians need to make this hard decision, but they need to be on time. Because if we wait for 15 years not to discuss, not to work on this, at the end it will be even harder and even more expensive. So you mentioned previously during some of the questions that we need to make a repower plan for Western Balkan, but I think that we need to follow Repower EU. We need only just transition fund separate for Western Balkan, and this should be a joint initiative from our region, because let's say we have more sun than Romania. If we give 4,000 euros to the household, we will have even better numbers than them. So this is obvious. We have 20 or 30% more radiation than them. So at the end, we are having this is very simple. At the end, we are having the same obligation, the same targets, 0 emissions. They have just transition funds, cold transition regions, I don't know how many facility funds, banks. We don't have anything. And at the end, the same targets. So this is obviously that something needs to be changed in the region, and it's better for us to start with this initiative, let's say through the Energy Community Secretariat. So I believe that if we are finalizing this with EU, we can have more success in the region.
Well, thank you very much. I've just, for the comparison, ask Mr. Agafite, coal regions in transition Romania. I just happen to know the latest information. It seems to be your program for restructuring the just transition regions in one part of Romania. It's a model for the other Western Balkan countries, and delegation from Serbia visited just recently Romania. But would it be possible to design socio-economic restructuring of that region without support of European Union?
That's a very hard question to ask, but I think I would come back a little bit to your previous question, there's a lot of private money that looks into investing into green energies. And the first thing that an investor asks, at least when they come to me at the government, is for political stability and legislative predictability. If we have these two key elements at first, then we can talk about attracting private money. And we have a lot of Exim banks like Japan, we have a lot of investments funds, even from the Middle East, that are coming and looking at EU. Not only at EU, but at Europe, because these are money that want to be part of this transition, and they have to get into Europe somehow. So if we have political stability, legislative predictability, and a stable framework, I think we can attract a lot of private investments in these sectors that would help us reconvert the economies, because there's no other way. We cannot postpone this. I think this crisis that we passed through last year should be a catalyst towards fastening the transition to the green energy.
Since you didn't mention, I just happen to know that the funds that are funds that are allocated for Romania for the just transition is more than 2.5 billion. I will just continue on with the question of financing and the question of importance of having available support from the European Union, asking Minister Christov, what are plans for just transition in Bulgaria? How do you think they'll be realized? And what is the importance of availability of European Union funds in that process?
The just transition plans for Bulgaria have not been submitted yet, as we believe that it is better, we have a saying in Bulgaria, better to measure 3 times and to cut once rather than cut many times. So basically, as I mentioned before, what we're trying to do is to have a coherent approach and synchronize all these funds that are available for the just transition, for the Repower EU, and from the Recovery and Resilience Plan. But what is our general approach for financing? Projects that are commercially feasible, such as power generation from wind and solar, we try to attract private investments. Projects that are related with technologies that still are borderline and not purely commercially feasible, such as, for example, geothermal energy, energy storage system, especially grid scale, that still do not have very clear examples or cannot be proven to be economically feasible. These are the projects where we target to provide some support, including with funds from the European Union. But I hear several times that the EU countries get this massive help from the European Union in the range of billions. For Bulgaria, the just transition plans are basically 1.1 billion, I believe. But there is no free lunch. EU countries contribute to the EU budget, and then the EU budget is redistributed back in priority areas. So it's not like EU countries just sit and somehow from the European Union we get these billions in finance. We have obligations and we have contributions. It works exactly the same way as the national budget. Everybody contributes in the national budget in forms of taxes and other forms, and then these funds are distributed in areas that are prioritized in the common well-being. So the European Union acts exactly in the same way, and the funds that we receive from the European Union are actually funds generated including with the contribution of Bulgaria as EU member. The European Union does not do any commercial activity, so there is no profit to be distributed. So we appreciate the funding. Against that, we have certain commitments. Just for example, since we're talking about coal, currently 1 megawatt hour of electricity produced from coal in Bulgaria, it's basically about 170, 180 euros, where the biggest portion of that is the price of the CO2 emissions that we pay. And this is due to the obligation that we have within the European Union. Countries that do not have these obligations, electricity produced from coal is very cheap, actually. So we contribute funds to the European Union. Jointly, all the EU members, we decide how to distribute the funds so that we reach priority targets that we have identified ourselves, and then these funds are redistributed back. So we should think about this as basically a national budget.
Well, I emphasize these questions because the subject of CBAM and CO2 and emission trading system and a regional emission trading system, which I personally don't believe will be established in time, is all really about collecting and allocating money. So we have still 10 minutes. I will reserve my two last questions to Minister Đakić and to Mr. Dixon. So, Minister Đakić, da li u vašem viđenju Elektroprivreda Republike Srpske će biti nosilac tranzicije ili smatrate da će i privatni investitori u velike proizvodne kapacitete biti bitni kao i mali investitori u distribuiranu proizvodnju?
Mi sada već u ovoj strukturi novih investicija imamo elektroprivredu kao važnog nosioca i svakako da ona treba i u budućnosti da ostane u takvoj poziciji snažnog nosioca razvoja novih proizvodnih kapaciteta zasnovanih na obnovljivim izvorima energije. Naravno da je realizacija takve ideje usko povezana sa finansiranjem i mislim da o finansiranju za Bosnu i Hercegovinu treba govoriti također kao jednom specifičnom pristupu, zato što još u nekim političkim krugovima u Bosni i Hercegovini to se da posle prenosi na finansijske institucije ovog nivoa kao što su EBRD, EIB i druge, postoji još uvijek nekakav znak sumnje prema stabilnosti u Bosni i Hercegovine i potrebi da li se nesmetano bez ograničenja ili sa posebnim obezbeđenjem rizika za plasman sredstava treba pristupati. Dakle, oni pristupaju sa pojačanim rizicima prema nama koji nisu prisutni u drugim evropskim državama, pa čak i državama Zapadnog Balkana. I to predstavlja ozbiljan problem u pogledu napretka u ovom procesu dekarbonizacije i ukupne energetske tranzicije. Ako gledamo strukturu investicija koje su u toku i oni koje će biti u narednom periodu, dominantne su investicije koje dolaze iz sektora, iz privatnog sektora, da ih tako označimo. Investitori su inostrane kompanije ili kompanije povezane sa domaćim partnerima i to smatramo najboljim mogućim odnosom u ovom trenutku i prema interesovanjima za investiranje u Bosni i Hercegovini, kod nas posebno u Republici Srpskoj, ja predviđam jedan izuzetno povoljan period koji dolazi u pogledu obima interesa i mogućnosti za investiranje i mi smo sa stanovišta propisa koji su bili neophodni, sve propise donijeli. Republika Srpska usvojila kompletno evropsko zakonodavstvo u pogledu energetike, donoseći sve propise koji su bili potrebni, svi su oni ocijenjeni sa izuzetno visokim ocjenama u pogledu usklađenosti sa evropskim zakonodavstvom. Dakle, tu nemamo nijednu prepreku. Imamo apsolutno osiguranu političku stabilnost u kojoj institucije Republike Srpske mogu da preuzmu odgovornost za sebe, za sve projekte koji se na našem prostoru realizuju. Onaj dio gdje je neophodna garancija ili podrška koju daju institucije države, vlada prije svega, ali istovremeno opšti ambijent je takav da daje apsolutno sigurnost za investicije. Tako da ja predviđam jedan stabilan period u budućem periodu i mogućnost da u jednom miksu, dakle, privatnih investicija i investicija koje dolaze izvana, naravno, i investicija koje će imati elektroprivreda, vidimo tu sigurnost u budućnosti dostizanja ovih ciljeva o kojima govorimo, koji su dio ove današnje panel diskusije. Ono na što treba obratiti pažnju jeste da bi, po našem mišljenju, bilo puno bolje da i evropske institucije ulože dodatni napor da se što je moguće prije stabilizuju energetski tokovi ovde, da se da doprinos okončanju ratnog sukoba na području Ukrajine i da ogromna sredstva koja Evropa danas usmjerava kroz razne vidove pomoći i podrške za trajanje toga rata preusmjere i politikom dođe do brzog okončanja toga sukoba, a onda taj dio sredstava koji odlaze tamo kao vidovi podrške Ukrajini stavio na raspolaganje i zemljama Zapadnog Balkana za ubrzan ekonomski rast, posebno za ovu energetsku tranziciju koja nam je svima od posebne važnosti.
Hvala, ministre Žekiću. Mr. Dixon, we are very short of the remaining time, but I would ask you just to make a short comment on the discussion you have heard from the region, or maybe a message, not the conclusion, message to the stakeholders in the region regarding development of wind and solar and supporting technologies.
Thank you, Mirza, and thank you, fellow panelists. I've been very encouraged by what you have all said. It's very clear the strong political commitment and political will to accelerate the energy transition, the recognition that the build-out of renewables are central to achieving energy security as well as climate security. I find it encouraging also the strong recognition you have of the importance of investing in your grid infrastructure, both at transmission and distribution level. Minister Djordjevic said in her opening remarks that, well, in the UK you apply for a grid connection permit today, you may not get it until 2031 or 32. That is for offshore wind, but let me stress, the UK government does not like that at all. The fact that there are so many delays today, and they are, as a matter of urgency, changing their rules so that grid connection permits will be given much more quickly, and we're seeing that trend across the rest of Europe as well. And I think I would encourage you all to ensure, whether it's EMS here in Serbia or transmission distribution operators elsewhere, Transelectrica, and so on, that you keep up the pressure to invest in the build-out of grids as quickly as possible to integrate the variable renewables. Provided you're investing at the same time in demand response, both for household consumers and industrial consumers, and something in storage, then you can integrate an increased share of variable renewables and a rapidly increasing share of variable renewables in your electricity, in your wider energy system, without too much trouble. And the experience in the rest of Europe shows that that is the case. But the grid operators need to be pushed to invest. They should be investing also not just in new lines, but the optimization of existing lines. There's a lot of spare capacity in today's grid. A lot of times when we don't have enough electrons in the existing cables, the temperatures are quite low. But if you install things like dynamic line rating, modular power flow control, you can monitor what the temperature is in the lines, and when it's lower than it can be, well, you can put more electrons in, and software is enabling us to optimize existing grid infrastructure now. Thank you.
I would like to thank the panelists. We were not able to shorten it 10 minutes like organizers wanted, but at least we were on time. So let me make the final remarks. Pošto mislim da je ovo bitno za prisutne iz zemalja Zapadnog Balkana, ja sam sa zadovoljstvom prihvatio bude moderator ove sesije zato što Reset trenutno privodi kraju istraživanja u 6 zemalja Zapadnog Balkana vezano za procjenu da li će u sljedećih 3 do 5 godina doći do ubrzanja energetske tranzicije, da li je to izlaz za energetsku sigurnost. U istraživanju učestvuje, istraživanje se izvrši za koji mjesec, preko 100 eksperata iz svih 6 zemalja. Oni su procjenjivali i političku volju, meni je drago da smo ovdje čuli odlučnu političku volju da je dekarbonizacija put za obezbeđenje energetske sigurnosti. Ocjenjivali su i sve druge aspekte, između ostalog i financijski aspekt. I evo samo kratko kao zaključak. Nisu toliko optimistični kao što je danas bio optimističan ovaj panel. Mnogo je složen proces, po njihovom mišljenju, puno prepreka ima i pogotovo nisu optimistični da će ključni akteri energetske tranzicije, vlade i elektroprivrede biti nosioci ovoga procesa. Ovo je samo kao za razmišljanje. Normalno, svi vi ćete biti u prilici da taj dokument dobijete kad bude javno dostupan. Hvala svim panelistima još jednom. Prema scenariju, nakon panela ide prezentacija sponzora. Prva prezentacija je Lafarge Srbija, a prezentaciju će predstaviti generalni direktor Dimitrije Knjeginjić. Hvala vam još jednom i hvala još jednom.